it's okay to not have a 5-year, 10-year plan. I have never been that kind of person. And I feel like by following my curiosity and my interests and finding the things I like, and then maybe crossing off the things I don't like as I go, has really served me well, and has kept me just sort of interested in the moment and enjoying the journey.
I'm so excited that we're getting a chance to sit down virtually with Heidi Williams, who is our founder for the West program, but also she is so much more than that. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of Heidi, and then I'm going to bring her onto the stage. So Heidi is the Director of Engineering at Grammarly, where she leads Grammarly Business. In her over 25 years of her career, she's led several 1.0 initiatives with a focus on B2B and platforms, including VP of Platform Engineering at Box, founder of West, co-founder and CTO of tEQuitable, and various engineering teams at Adobe. Heidi is also a technical advisor for PaymentWorks and Raised for Good. So let me bring Heidi to the stage. All right, welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. So glad to be here. And I have to say, I love seeing so many familiar faces from every different aspect of my life and my career. Folks who I see live in my neighborhood, and our kids went to preschool together. Hi. And folks I was on maternity leave with and worked together at Adobe and Macromedia. So, and then folks from different roles that I've had across my career. So anyway, welcome everybody. So glad to see you all.
Awesome. And I'm also seeing some love for Grammarly in the chat too. So good work over there.
Excellent.
Okay, so with that long description and bio that I just shared with everyone, I'm going to jump right into the questions. So, did you always know that you wanted to become the head of engineering or of an organization of 35 people within your Eng org when you were little? What were your childhood aspirations, and what did 10-year-old Heidi want to be when she grew up?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, I don't think even 10 or 15 years into my career did I know that I wanted to lead engineering organizations. And certainly as a 10-year-old had no idea that I wanted to do programming or computer science of any kind. I think when I was 10, I probably thought I would either be a teacher or a writer, or, I think I had other interests in sort of people and how what made people tick. I think in college I toyed with maybe going into psychology or learning other languages, something like that. So I think is probably anything but going into something really in the sciences, actually.
Excellent. And I think you mentioned to me as well that, in the past with teaching and psych and child development, some of these things all come into play when it comes to people management. And I'm curious about continuing this thread on people management. Like, what ways have you found to be effective when it came to scaling yourself in this role?
Yeah. Well, and let me even touch on that point about sort of, I do feel like teaching and writing and psychology all are part of my job now as an engineering leader, where there is a lot of mentorship, there's a lot of helping people learn and grow in their careers. Certainly the writing aspect and learning how to communicate effectively and get your ideas across is really important. And then of course, as a people manager, understanding what's important to someone, what motivates them, what are their career aspirations, and kind of helping them achieve all of that. So I do feel lucky that my 10-year-old self can say, well, I kind of got to do some of those things that I had in mind. And so, certainly as you grow as an engineering manager and then become a manager of managers and then a director or a VP or whatever it is, a lot of what you need to do to scale, and what I've had to learn to do, and I still think it's actually hard, is figuring out not just how to delegate, but how to know which folks in your organization are ready for the next level of responsibility, and maybe even reflecting when you can grow someone, when you have time to help someone grow into that role, or maybe when you have such a gap in how much someone needs to learn that maybe you need to bring someone new into your organization that can operate at a more strategic level and then give me bandwidth to do the next level of things that I need to do. So I think it really does come down to delegating and then figuring out how to surround yourself with the best possible team whose skills complement each other and have different levels of maturity or strategic thinking or strengths or interests and things like that, and really working together as a team. So, so I think that's one of the things I've tried to do to scale as an engineering leader.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't do all the things yourself when you're trying to scale. And I feel like the flip side of delegating too is, as someone who's an employee of that potential manager who's looking to scale, learning to ask for what you want. So I would love to hear a little bit about your story of learning how to ask for what you want. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think I actually learned that a little bit the hard way. So if I go back to my time, when I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter, who is now 16, I had gone, let me back up. I had an unfortunate, well, let's see how to tell this exactly. So I basically, at one point while I was at Adobe, I ended up interviewing at Google, and I was pretty sure that I was going to take the job. And so, told my manager's manager that I was quitting. And essentially they said, wait, no, you should have told us before that you weren't happy, and let's figure out a plan. Like, what is it that you actually want? And for the first time ever, I felt like I was in a moment where someone was really asking me that question. I was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And so I sort of laid out the different things that I thought were important to me, and ended up getting many of them, which really ended up being a huge boost to my career. Let me tell a little bit of a backstory of why I learned this the hard way. So the reason that I was actually a little bit unhappy was the year before. As I mentioned, I was on maternity leave, and the first half of the year, I had been like the best 6 months of my career. We shipped this amazing product under crazy time constraints. No one thought we could do it. We were rebuilding the whole thing from scratch. It was a really big team, maybe as many as 18 people working on it. And it was an amazing release. It was super high quality, super, super impactful. Then I went on maternity leave about 2 weeks later for 6 months. And when I came back, unfortunately, it was January and performance review time. And my manager sort of forgot that I had been there the first 6 months. And so no raise was allocated or set aside for me. It was had been distributed to the team. I had hoped that I would be promoted to senior manager at the time. But because I had been gone for 6 months, I basically had sort of dropped out of people's minds, unfortunately. And so I felt really upset about that I thought if I worked that hard, I should have been recognized for it. And so I sort of said, yeah, okay, I understand. And I just kind of let it go. I didn't push for a raise. I didn't push for a promotion. And it kind of sat with me for 6 months and made me a little unhappy, just feeling that it had been unfair. And so that was when Google called and said, do you want to come interview for this role? And so I thought, all right, why not? Maybe Google has an idea of what I can do and how I can be successful. Actually, funny short story, they were trying to figure out how to embed Flash in their search engine. Anyway, going back for folks who remember Flash back in the day. Anyway, I really thought, this is great. I'm going to have this opportunity to do something new. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. They'll give me the title that I want. They'll, pay me what I think I'm worth, et cetera, et cetera. But interestingly, when I did go back and sort of negotiate and I said, what is it that you want? I realized what I actually want is that I'm really curious to learn about the business side of engineering management, not just what is it that we're going to build? What are the ideas, but why? Or even maybe looking at, partnerships or different kinds of aspects of business, the sort of how do you even make these product decisions? And so I said that out loud, and they said, great, we're going to get you a mentor. And someone on the business side, he was in corporate development and speaking a language I did not understand at the time, which was fascinating. They also sponsored me to go to a Stanford executive education and take 2 weeks to be on site and really have like a mini MBA in 2 weeks. I did end up getting promoted and also got a raise, but it never felt as good as if I had just been recognized outright for it. So anyway, long story, but I feel like that was the moment where I realized it's so much better to ask for what you want early and not let it, become a sore spot or feel like a consolation prize when someone's doing a diving save to keep you at the company. And I think ever after that, I feel like I was more proactive about my career and about asking for what I wanted before it was too late, just to let people know my expectations. Otherwise, they'd have to kind of read my mind if I didn't say it out loud. So long story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, when it comes to career planning and, being able to ask for what you want, career planning is the number one thing that we hear from our mentees all the time that they want to work on through the West Mentorship Program. So what advice might you have for mid-career women who are trying to find the work that they love?
Yeah, I think it really does come back to exactly what you were just saying, finding the work that you love. I have never been someone that had a long-term plan that said, someday I want to run my own company or be a head of engineering. I think I always just sort of looked around me and was curious about the things around me. What people did I admire in terms of what they did or how they operated or insights that they had, or trying to figure out someone in a different role, knowing like, what is that role? What is that all about? And so I think I used my curiosity and kind of followed my passions, and that sort of led to more and more responsibility. And like I said, asking for things like later, after I had done that mini MBA, I call it an executive education, I got an opportunity to work on a partnership with Salesforce. I was like, this is cool. Why do companies partner? How do they do co-development? And so I just sort of followed that curiosity, which later ended up benefiting me when I wanted to get into partnerships and building platforms at Box. And so I guess I would say it's okay to not have a plan. That's the big advice. It's okay to not have a 5-year, 10-year plan. I have never been that kind of person. And I feel like by following my curiosity and my interests and finding the things I like, and then maybe crossing off the things I don't like as I go, has really served me well, and has kept me just sort of interested in the moment and enjoying the journey more than worrying about where I end up at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've also heard you talk about your opportunity to learn within your current role and how that's also kept you engaged.
Very much so. Yeah, I'm very motivated by learning, and I think I'm always happiest when there's something new that I'm learning. And I think there's something also about taking kind of, risks and saying, I can go into anything where I know half of it and I don't know the other half of it. That's like the perfect mix for me, where at least I'm a little bit grounded. I don't feel like I'm completely floating in the air. I've got one foot on the ground, but the other half I can learn and grow, and I have a support network around me to help me in case I fail, or help me get back on track if I'm going in the wrong direction. So I really like doing those kinds of things, taking that calculated risk to go explore something new, and that's really energizing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually plays really well into my next question about how you've been able to find courage in taking big risks in your career. So for instance, you left Box to start West as a mentorship program, and you co-founded another organization called tEQuitable with Lisa. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how you were able to find that confidence and courage to go for it.
Yeah. And first of all, I will say, I just feel extremely, incredibly fortunate and lucky to have been in financial situations where my family could sort of last for a while, maybe on no paycheck or a limited paycheck. So just fully recognizing that's not the situation everyone is in. And I feel very grateful that we were able to do that. But I did also sort of set aside a timeline and said, even for West, I said, let me try this for a year, figure out if I can run a business and know what that's like, learn how to do sales, which was wildly uncomfortable when I started, but I actually have had a bunch of different life experiences that have helped me get good at sales. And so learning how to build a business and saying, let's put a 1-year clock on it and say, this is how far we'll go. Let's actually do some budgeting and see if we can make it a year. I think the same thing happened for tEQuitable. Again, I had it was within that first year actually that I was starting West that I realized, oh, actually, I really miss building a product. And so when the opportunity to work on tEQuitable came around, I thought, oh, this is great. I can use my engineering skills again. And so it was really within that first year window that I had carved out for myself. And as I mentioned, having one foot on the ground and taking a risk in something else, whether it's like learning a business or figuring out the administrative pieces, I felt that I had learned that through West and was able to bring that to tEQuitable. Then at tEQuitable, started coding again for the first time in 15 years. And I thought, okay, well, I know how to problem solve. Maybe I don't know React yet. And I've always kind of been afraid of JavaScript, but I'll figure it out. And so, certainly Google and Stack Overflow helped with all of that. So I think that's part of it is not just taking, figuring out what do I know and what am I going to learn, but then also figuring out what's my support and learning path for that. And so thinking, as I mentioned, going back to coding Google, Stack Overflow, who do I know in the industry that would be willing to mentor me into coding again, and things like that, and sort of figuring out what was my support network for this new risk that I was going to take on. That was an important piece of it. And I would say for anyone who's changing jobs, if you're going to take on something risky, ask your new manager, how are you going to support me in this role? How are you going to support me in this learning journey? It's a great way up front to say that they are also committed and accountable for helping you be successful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you've also relied a lot on your network for resilience when it comes to being able to continue to learn, or to be able to find out about new opportunities. You've done so much in your 25 years of your career, and there's so many more years to go, as an engineer, founder, a mother, a leader, and just so much more. What tactics have you learned along the way to help you stay resilient and sane?
Yeah, there's one that really comes to mind, which honestly, it was a huge mind shift for me when it happened. But when I was at Box, they offered a bunch of different courses and learning and development opportunities. And one of them was called the Energy Project. And as all good things come in quadrants, so does the Energy Project. And the whole concept was how to balance your energy. In the quadrant, you sort of have higher energy and low energy. You have positive energy and negative energy. And so to think about what they look like, low positive energy, you are kind of in a moment of renewal and refreshing, and you're sort of in this calm and peaceful place. When you're in high positive energy, you're firing on all cylinders, you're getting everything done, you're at the top of your game. But we all know what happens when it starts to get frantic and chaotic. You get into high negative energy, and you are frantic and freaking out, and maybe like not everything's coming together, and you're getting really stressed out. And then the thing that happens after that is low negative energy, and that's burnout. And from any of those quadrants, you always can come back to low positive energy to refresh and renew. And then there's multiple kinds of energy, whether it's mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and recognizing which of those needs to be refilled in this renewal piece. And the big thing that really resonated for me was that you cannot stay in high positive energy for long. And if you are someone who supports other people, or that people are relying on you in some way, you can't do that for a sustained period very long. You have to come back to low positive energy and renewal. And that was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to put myself last. I don't have to say, well, after work and after my kids and after my husband and after my friends, then I can finally go get some exercise, or I can, go have a glass of wine with a friend, or take a vacation by myself, or with some friends, or something like that. It was the first time I realized I had to put myself first and had to refill my cup in order to ever get back to high positive energy and supporting everyone else around me. And so it just flipped the script completely. I think we know a lot of women have the tendency to put themselves last, but this was justification about exactly why I had to tell everyone around me, sit back, I need a moment, I'm going to go do a thing, I'll be back, and be back with you when I'm ready. And so that really, really helped me and got me into a point of sort of sustainably taking care of myself so that I can continue to be my best for others that rely on me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. So I get to work with you on a regular basis. So I feel very privileged to have you in my corner, and to be able to ask you all of the questions that I want to ask. But this summit is not about me. It's about all of the attendees that have joined us for today. So I have one last question for you before we open up to the audience. For our last question, what is one main takeaway you'd like our attendees to remember?
Yeah, I guess I really was reflecting on the name of this summit, and that it's about leadership. And I think I guess two things that I would say. One, thank you all for taking time to invest in yourselves and your own careers. It is so important. And the reason that it's important is that leadership really does show up in every possible way. You could be an individual contributor, you could be a people manager, you could be a herder of cats, like a project manager, a program manager, someone who works really cross-functionally. And so that leadership, besides the work that you do, you are also all our future role models and leaders for the next generation of women in tech. tech. And so I love that you are investing in your own careers and helping yourselves become leaders so that we can continue the flow and increasing diversity across the tech industry. Still not a solved problem. And so I just want to say thank you all for being here. And I hope you really get some awesome takeaways this week and can share back with your organizations or with other women in tech that you meet who are coming along and trying to figure out what's what and how to make it in this industry. So so that's my big takeaway for everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heidi. Big round of applause for Heidi for sharing all of her amazing experience and knowledge with us. So what I'm going to be doing now is I will be inviting Inky to the stage, and she'll be running our Q&A portion of this talk. So Inky, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Heidi. That was amazing. I was taking so many notes furiously. So we have a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. So I'll just go through a couple of them and we'll see what we have time for. How did you broach the topic of getting promoted?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of times that I've had to broach that topic, and so certainly my example at Adobe was not my most graceful. I didn't really want to sort of use a moment of leaving as leverage, but at the end of it, I was like, I really do feel like I deserved it 6 months ago, so why not ask for it? The other time that I actually advocated for myself to be promoted was when I was at Box, and this ends up being a long story, but I love telling it because I feel like there's some nuggets in here that everybody can use. So I was a senior director of engineering and had already been promoted pretty quickly from director to senior director. And I thought I was ready for VP. And I had some peers who also my boss thought was ready for VP. But when I went to talk to my boss and said, I'd like to go up for VP, he said, well, I don't think you're ready yet. And I was like, wait, this is news to me. What are you talking about? I thought I was ready. And certainly if my peers are, I am. And I know I'm a different flavor of VP maybe than others. So what I did was I did a 360 review in person. I went and interviewed a bunch of my peers and said, do you think I'm ready for VP? What does VP of engineering mean to you? What do I do well? What do you think I should work on? And I basically collected all of that data and essentially came to the conclusion that I actually was a different kind of VP than other heads of engineering. Maybe I wasn't the most deep technically or the most operationally effective, but that business orientation was something none of the other heads of engineering or leaders in engineering had. So I basically made the case that he needed me on his team because I brought something special and I had a VP presence around the business side of things and strategy that was really, really important. And so using the voices of others who gave me feedback about whether I was ready, I was able to make a case successfully. And one other thing, so first of all, the 360 feedback in person. The other thing was there was another woman at the organization who wanted to go up for director. And she was like, I don't know if I'm ready. And I said, I don't know if I'm ready. She's like, wait a minute, we're doing that thing where we don't think we're ready, but we are. And so I said, all right, I'll dare you to go for director if you dare me to go to VP. And so we both put our cases together, read each other's cases, gave feedback, and then we both ended up getting promoted. So it was a great case of holding each other accountable and not letting ourselves fall in the trap of thinking we're not ready just because one person said so.
Yeah, I mean, that's really poignant because I think a lot of people were talking about imposter syndrome in the chat. And do you feel like you rely on other colleagues and do you talk openly about that in order to get yourself out of that mental loop?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like as long as you can build a trusted relationship with people, I mean, there's a concern sometimes when you are self-deprecating. If you're sharing that with people that you don't fully trust, it can reflect badly on you because they're like, yeah, I don't think you're doing a good job. And you just said it yourself too. And so be careful not to fall into that trap. But on the other hand, if you can find people that are trusted where you can just sort of be like, oh crap, I think I screwed something up and I don't know how bad it is. Like, what do you think? If you can actually have that open dialogue and have others reflect back to you that maybe it's not as bad as you think, or they don't know that thing either, or nobody has done that and it's hard. It gives you a little boost of confidence that there are external factors that might be at play and it's okay to not know everything all the time. So I definitely rely on my peers, both at my company and outside of my company to give me a pep talk and a boost when I'm feeling hard on myself.
That makes a lot of sense. So there's a couple of questions here that we're talking about networking and talking about those 5-year plans. One of the questions says, how do you talk to people who you are hiring or networking with who ask you about your 5-year plans? What do you respond to that?
Yeah, I do. It's so funny. I have a trick where I cannot answer that question of where do you plan to be in 5 years, but if instead you ask me at the end of your life, what do you want to say you have done or what impact you've had, for some reason, that's easier for me to contemplate. And so I think the first time someone asked me that, I was like, oh yeah, before I'm done, I want to write a book. And like, gosh, wow, saying that out loud, I guess I have to write a book at some point. But yeah, so I think I talk instead about what I want to learn or what I want to do, or recognizing that I want to have an impact or I want to leverage my strengths, like being a business leader. So when I first was looking for a job, I was like, well, I want to be somewhere where I have a seat at the table to make business decisions and not just product decisions. So so those are usually the kinds of things I talk about. I think either talk about what I want to learn, where I want to grow, or what kind of impact I want to have, rather than a specific title.
That's really helpful. So another question here was talking about how do you push initiatives through that you believe in?
That's a good question. Sheer force? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely someone who's a consensus builder. I think that's my natural style, and sort of connecting dots about things. I think there are definitely moments where I get the harder edge out and sort of say like, okay, no, this really has to happen, or whatnot. But yeah, I think I like to sort of test ideas and identify, like, are we clear that there is a problem here? Do we have data around that? If we have an idea of how to fix it, can we measure it when it's done? And so taking a little bit of an engineering orientation there around being clear on what problem we're trying to solve, and then how we'll measure success is often helpful. I guess the other thing I will say, this is a book I read when I was pretty early in career too. It was a book called How to Work with People You Can't Stand. But the whole point of it was, you can make amazing things happen if you can understand someone else's goal and help them achieve it, and share your goal, and they can help you achieve it. And if you work together, you can actually undo a lot of bad behavior or objections or people who say no and kind of stand in your way. Usually it comes from some frustration they have in achieving their own goal. And so even, you know, finding something that I believe in that I'm trying to push forward, if I can somehow tie that to other people's goals and understand where they're trying to go and how we can help each other, ends up being really effective.
That's really interesting. I think that touches on goals and everyone having the same goal, but there's a question here about working in an area of business that isn't being prioritized or not getting as much attention, and how do you approach that?
And so the question being, what do I do if I find myself in an area that's underinvested?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, honestly, I guess there's sort of maybe two approaches there. One, which is to either ask more questions around how does that area tie to the company goals, and understanding like, what is the right level of investment? What is the most impactful thing that you can do that ladders that area up to the company goals? Or honestly, advocating to get rid of it. Like, if you can, I am all a fan of saying, you know what, if this thing I'm not working on is not important, like, then we're all wasting our time, the whole team. And so I'd rather just cut it and put us on something that is more important. And once you sort of free yourself from being tied to that thing, I feel like opportunities open up, and you can sort of figure out either how to like further invest less in it or cut it completely, and sort of reorient your team towards something that is more important for the company.
Well, that's a really great approach. I think speaking of opportunities, they're talking here in the chat about how do you actually build a personal brand of you being a woman in tech, especially now. I think there's a lot of times in which people are looking for new opportunities. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's so funny. I think, I just am a super authentic person. Like, I can't help but be myself. And, there's certainly been times like, I mean, certainly transparent and things like that. And there are times where like, oh gosh, I shouldn't be fully transparent because I'm the leader of this team and they don't want me to tell them all the things that's on my mind and stuff like that. But, I think, I guess I just have, I don't know, I guess I've just sort of embraced who I am and tried to just sort of lead with authenticity. And I guess maybe one extra piece of that is I discovered sort of in college that I like public speaking. And so that has been maybe an easier way to develop a personal brand, because I actually have tried to find opportunities to do speaking, and then the sort of personal brand comes around the stories that I tell so I guess it's harder if you're maybe not wanting to do that, but you could become a writer and write blog posts. And a good friend from Box, she found her voice through writing blogs, and I think really developed her personal brand in that way. And now she's doing some public speaking as well. So I think there are ways to sort of figure out, what are your strongly held opinions? What are the things you believe in? What are your strengths and your superpowers? And then double down on sort of crafting a story around that, and then find opportunities that align with it as well, so that you can really leverage your personal brand and your interests with the projects and opportunities that you work on.
That's awesome. You spoke a lot about being in environments that have resources for you to develop that knowledge, but what happens, I think there's a question here about navigating an environment that's ambiguous, where the situation is ambiguous and you're not really clear what success looks like. Can you talk a little bit more about what you reach for in those environments when you're not sure actually where the specific goal is pointed towards?
Yeah. Sure. Sorry, I think my video paused for just a second there. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, hopefully there's at least someone who has assigned you this work that you can talk with and sort of say like, well, maybe we don't know what success looks like, but maybe the first thing is to do a little exploration and see if we can define success, and sort of figuring out how to take something really big and turn it into those sort of more concrete pieces. And so, I think, I don't know, I guess I even think in ambiguous situations, it's not even just learning what you do need to do, but maybe crossing things off that you don't need to do. So figuring out how to maybe scope it a little bit smaller, or say, let's agree that this part is a non-goal, so that we don't have to focus on it. But hopefully there's at least a few people in the area who you could interview and say, well, what do you think success looks like? Or, what do you want to get out of this? Or what do we think? Yeah, it's maybe even just having a goal without a success metric is still enough to at least get started. Like maybe the first goal is just to create a little bit more clarity, create a little bit more shape around what it is you're trying to do. I don't know if that's helpful. That sounded very vague to me, but
it's very helpful. All right, I keep seeing a couple more messages or questions in the chat. Keep them coming, guys. There's a question here about diverse teams, and if you do, how do you make that happen? If you do have a diverse team, how do you make that happen? And if you don't, is it something that you have to make a plan to achieve?
Yeah, I'm very proud of my team, actually, that it is very diverse on multiple dimensions, and I really love that. It is interesting. This sort of comes back to, what role we all play as leaders and role models. Honestly, I mean, I hate to say it, but I feel like it is a little easier just to hire women on my team, because I can be a leader and a role model for folks, and they really appreciate that. And so that is one thing that I think we all have as a benefit in something in our pocket that we can use, which is to offer mentorship or partnership, or at least to be able to start building some sort of community. So I definitely do that. I also participate a lot in communities, and I recommend that for anyone who's trying to diversify their team and really get involved in communities, to not just be there for recruiting, but to be there to participate and to give back. And I think that's really important. So, so whether it's through West, or there's a great online community called Alpha, which I really appreciate and have found that's a great way to connect with people. And then at our company, just generally trying to participate in different kinds of events and conferences and community of different kinds, and in different aspects and whatnot. So, and then on top of that, just sort of honestly setting yourself recruiting goals to say, let's sort of make sure that my outreach is to a diverse set of candidates, and that it's ethnically diverse and racially diverse, and all sorts of underrepresented groups, making sure that more people you outreach to, the more likely you will have some folks that actually come on site and interview and pass the interview and come to your company. So I really partner very strongly with recruiting in so many ways to make sure that we're looking at diversity across the pipeline.
Awesome. And you said that group that you mentioned, is it Alpha? I think it's in the chat.
Yeah, ELPHA, that's right. Yeah, a Y Combinator company.
Awesome. All right, I think that was all of our questions. This has been great. Thank you, Heidi. I've learned so much. So the next session is going to start at 1, and I invite you all to join that, maybe a little bio break in between. But if there are any last questions for Heidi, we have a couple more minutes.
And maybe by 1 o'clock, you mean East Coast, whereas it's 10 o'clock West
Sorry,
Coast.
yes, East Coast time.
Yeah.
Yes, the dreaded time difference.
Yeah. And for folks in Europe, I'm sure it's even later, et cetera. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to stay in chat, or feel free to take your bio break or whatever you need, coffee break before the next session starts in about 8 minutes. And I think folks can just unmute if you have a question, but thank you, and hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Heidi.
much. This was amazing, Heidi. I actually just popped it in right at the last second, but earlier when you were talking about sort of the energy project, you had mentioned everything being in quadrants, and that was like the first time I had heard this concept. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah, I was just joking that like a lot of the books you see, whether it's Radical Candor or the Energy Project, all these things, they always have like the quadrant where you're like the top right, the bottom left, whatever. I just was joking that like every framework that people write about always comes in a quadrant.
Okay. I was like, is this some new concept that I missed? Like, what is Heidi talking about? Let me learn more. Thank you.
It's just a pattern. I mean, honestly, if you want to write a successful book, come up with a quadrant and then describe it and you'll profit.
There it is.
That's awesome. Yeah, I threw that out there so quickly. I should have explained it. Awesome.